He was the perfect husband until I found out who he was perfect for. While he thought I was oblivious, I was quietly collecting every piece of proof, and when I finally left, I took the house, the money, and his peace. If you'd asked me 3 years ago what my marriage was like, I would have told you without hesitation that it was good. Solid. Safe. Daniel was charming in that subtle, old-world way. He never forgot anniversaries, brought me coffee in bed on Sunday mornings, and could always make people laugh at dinner parties without stealing the spotlight. My friends would say, "You're so lucky," and I would nod, believing it. We had a nice house in a quiet neighborhood. 2 cars. A vacation once a year. It was the kind of life you could take a deep breath in, the kind of life that felt permanent. At least, that's what I thought. The first crack was so small, I almost ignored it. One evening, Daniel came home late, saying he'd been stuck in a meeting. Nothing unusual, his job in finance often kept him after hours. But when I reached for his jacket to hang it up, I noticed the faint scent of perfume. Not mine. Not any perfume I recognized. I asked about it casually, teasing him. Got a secret admirer at work? He laughed it off, saying a client had hugged him goodbye. And I let it go, except I didn't, because once you notice something out of place, your brain starts quietly filing away every inconsistency. The second crack came 2 weeks later. I was sorting laundry when I found a receipt in his pants pocket: dinner for 2 at a restaurant we'd never been to. I googled the place. Romantic. Dimly lit. Pricey. I told myself it could have been a client dinner. But why didn't he mention it? That's when I decided to start paying attention. I didn't confront him, not yet. Instead, I started keeping a mental list. Late nights. Unexplained charges. New shirts I hadn't seen before. His phone, once casually left on the counter, was now always in his pocket or face down. It wasn't enough to accuse him. But it was enough to make me feel like I was living beside a stranger. The third crack was different. It wasn't about him coming home late or smelling like perfume. It was about how he looked at me. One Saturday morning, I was making pancakes. He sat at the kitchen island scrolling through his phone. When I set the plate in front of him, he looked up. And for a second, I swear he had to remind himself to smile. It was small. A flicker. But it wasn't the way a man looks at his wife of 7 years. That's when I knew, not that he was cheating, not yet, but that something had shifted. And when something shifts in silence, it usually means there's something you're not supposed to hear. So I stopped being just a wife. I became an observer. It started innocently enough, glancing at his phone when he left the room, noticing when he changed his lock screen. But the more I noticed, the more I realized how deliberate his new habits were. If he texted, it was with his phone tilted away. If he took a call, he'd step outside. If I walked into a room, he'd pocket his phone mid-sentence. And then, the breadcrumb that turned suspicion into certainty: a bank statement. Daniel handled most of our finances, but I still got duplicate mail for joint accounts. One afternoon, I opened an envelope out of habit. Most of it was normal groceries, bills, gas. But one recurring charge caught my eye: a boutique hotel downtown. Twice a month. When I asked Daniel about it later, he didn't even flinch. Said it was for client privacy during negotiations. Smooth. Too smooth. I nodded, smiled, pretended to believe him, and that's when my plan began forming. The first rule was simple: don't tip your hand. I acted as though life was perfectly normal. I laughed at his jokes. I kissed him goodnight. I let him think the marriage was still the safe, comfortable thing it had always been. But privately, I started building my case. I opened a new email account one Daniel didn't know existed. I bought a small, discreet voice recorder. I dug through old credit card statements, compiling every charge that didn't fit the pattern. I wasn't just looking for proof of an affair. I was mapping his behavior, finding the patterns he didn't realize were visible. The hardest part was the waiting. Sometimes I'd feel this burning need to confront him right then and there, just to see the truth crack through his face. But I knew if I did, he'd have time to cover his tracks. To turn this into a war I wasn't prepared to fight, so I smiled, served him dinner, and let him think he was winning. And all the while, I was quietly arranging the pieces for a checkmate. The breakthrough came 3 months in. Daniel said he had to go out of town for a 2-day conference. I played along, even helped him pack. But that night, instead of staying home, I drove to the boutique hotel. I didn't go inside. I didn't need to. I just sat in my car across the street and waited. An hour later, I saw him, not in a suit, not with a briefcase. In jeans and a shirt I didn't recognize. Walking beside a woman with long, auburn hair. They were laughing close enough that their arms brushed with every step. They went inside together, and just like that, I had my confirmation, but I didn't cry. I didn't rage, I just turned the key in the ignition and drove home, already thinking about the next move, because catching him wasn't the goal, destroying him quietly, completely, and on my terms was. The night I saw him walk into that hotel with her, something in me shifted. The heartbreak wasn't sharp, it was cold. Clean. Like someone had flipped a switch from love to strategy. I didn't follow them inside. I didn't take photos. Not yet. One sighting wasn't enough. Not for what I had planned. Over the next 6 weeks, I built my case like I was preparing for trial. I followed him twice more, once to a wine bar across town, another time to the same hotel. Both times, the auburn-haired woman was with him. I bought a small telephoto lens for my camera and started taking photos from a distance. Every shot was time-stamped, dated, and stored in a cloud account he didn't know existed. I went through every bank and credit card statement for the past year. I highlighted every restaurant, hotel, and gift store he'd spent money at without my knowledge. I matched dates to his late nights and weekend conferences. Then I made a second set of copies, printed, bound, and tucked away in a safety deposit box under my name only. The second phase was harder. I met quietly with a divorce attorney who specialized in high-asset separations. She told me something that changed everything. In this state, marital misconduct can impact the division of property and alimony if you have proof. I slid the photos across her desk. Her smile was small but satisfied. "Get me more," she said. So I did. While Daniel thought he was pulling the wool over my eyes, I was creating an exit plan that would leave him with nothing but his own guilt to keep him warm at night. I opened a separate bank account in my name. I rerouted a portion of my paycheck into it every month. I found a discreet appraiser to evaluate our home and my grandmother's jewelry, both marital assets I intended to keep. I started recording our conversations, especially when he lied about where he'd been. I kept my voice calm, my tone neutral, so nothing would sound provoked, and I played my role perfectly. When he bought new clothes, I told him he looked handsome. When he came home late, I asked if he wanted dinner reheated. When he lied to my face, I smiled like I believed every word. I think that's what made it so satisfying. He never saw me coming. The serving was almost beautiful. I chose a Friday night, a night I knew he'd take her out. I booked a table at the same upscale restaurant, just 2 tables away from where he and his mistress Saturday. I arrived early, dressed in a sleek black dress he'd always liked. My attorney sat at the bar, papers in her bag. Daniel walked in with her, laughing, his hand resting lightly on her back. The look on his face when he saw me was something I'll remember until my last breath. I didn't wave. I didn't glare. I just smiled. Halfway through their meal, my attorney approached their table, set down the envelope, and said the words I'd been waiting for. "You've been served." The restaurant went silent. Daniel's face drained of color. The woman here looked like she'd been slapped. I stood, placed my napkin on the table, and walked out without a single word. The aftermath wasn't instant. It was slow. Deliciously slow. Daniel tried to call me that night. I didn't answer. He emailed. Texted. Showed up at the house. My attorney handled everything. The divorce was clean but brutal. I kept the house. The car. The jewelry. Half his retirement. He kept his pride, or what was left of it. Word got around. Friends who once called him the perfect husband started avoiding him at parties. The whispers followed him everywhere. At work. At the gym. Even at the coffee shop we used to go to together. And me? I slept better than I had in years. It was late spring when I finally opened the windows again. The house smelled different now, fresh paint, blooming jasmine from the garden, the faint trace of coffee drifting in from the kitchen. I stood in the living room, sunlight spilling across the hardwood floors, and realized something. There wasn't a single thing left here that he'd chosen, not the furniture, not the colors, not the life. The doorbell rang. A delivery. I signed for the package, thanked the driver, and as I closed the door, I caught my reflection in the glass, calm, clear-eyed, untouchable, and I thought of Daniel wherever he was now, probably still wondering when it all started to fall apart. The truth, it started the moment I stopped believing the lie of the perfect husband. The rest was just execution. I locked the door, turned up the music, and got back to living.